Hey, how's it going, everybody? Welcome back to Event Icons. Today we are talking about MCs when it comes to virtual events, remote MCs, virtual MCs, whatever you want to call it. You know, when it comes to your live streams and your presentations, you're still going to need someone who can energize the crowd, engage with the audience, and answer questions and get everybody riled up. We brought back one of our infamous event icons, Dan Ram, in the house today. I think you guys are going to love the tips and feedbacks that he has as a purely remote worker and someone who travels the entire world as an MC. We're going to be talking today some tactical tips for how you can use a virtual MC to make your events better. So let's dive right on in with this week's Event Icons.
It's Wednesday at 5 p.m. Eastern, so you know what that means. It's time for another episode of Event Icons.
Presented by Endless Events.
The show where you get to ask the icons of the events industry anything.
Just go to www.event-icons.com to ask questions.
Our iconic guests will answer them live during the entire show. Before we get started, the more people we have watching, the better the conversation. So please help share Event Icons
on Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn. Just tell your friends to watch at www.event-icons.com.
Now, without any further delay, this is Event Icons.
Well, welcome back, everyone. Thank you again for tuning on in. I want to dive in as soon as possible this one because I think this one's going to be jam-packed. As always, we're recording live, so if you have questions, throw them in the comments down below, and we'll ask it to the event icons themselves. In the house, we have the man, the myth, the legend, Dan Ram. You may have remember him from a recent Event Icons episode only a couple weeks ago that we published about how MCs can make or break your events. Well, we brought him back because we think it's important to start talking about what does the role of an MC look like in a virtual event. So let's go ahead and welcome our guest today, Mr. Dan Ram.
Hey!
Dan, welcome back to Event Icons. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you. It's so good to be back.
And to show how remote we are right now as well, tell everybody where you currently are broadcasting from.
Broadcasting from an elephant sanctuary in southern India, far remote, away from airports and socially distanced from everything.
Oh, incredible. Well, this is going to show us a little bit about how you can utilize an MC and have some energy. Dan is one of the most energetic people, and that's coming from someone who's already pretty energetic. Dan is probably one of the few people that might be even more energetic than I am. If you missed his episode a couple weeks ago on how MCs can make or break your event, go watch that, because then I think you're going to get a lot of tactical tips, and a lot of that will still apply here. But let's kick it all off with the first question. So in the past couple weeks, the events industry is very shifted. But what have you been up to the last couple weeks since you last been on the show? What do you got going on?
So I think I watched the coronavirus. So for those in 2050, when you watch this podcast, you'll understand the context is that I watched the coronavirus go from East Asia with my events in Singapore, Hong Kong, and India being canceled, then into the Middle East, it being postponed and canceled, then to Germany being postponed and canceled. I try to do as many events as I could because I love connecting with people. But the moral of this podcast is it is still possible and in new and fresh ways through virtual. So the work continues just in a very different format. But needless to say, there are no more human gatherings anywhere in the world. There's no more traveling. I was doing 2 to 3 international events per week, which meant I was in an airport or a plane every 3 days in different countries. And that is completely off the cards right now. But this is happening a lot more. And so this is exciting. Let's talk about how we can transfer and transform some of the things that we did in person into this new world of virtual.
I love it. I think I can't imagine for you right now, because for me, like, I'm a jet setter. I'm always constantly on the go, but you're even more jet setting, like what it's like to be sitting in one place for a long period of time. Our energy is just laser focused and absolutely put on to what we're doing. So let's dive right on in. So let's talk about this right now. So now that events are converting to virtual events, people are probably wondering, what is the role of the MC, and how do you think it's changed now since going from an in-person event where you said that you were climbing underneath stages and building stages and running cables if necessary, to now things have kind of shifted a little bit. Can you talk a little bit through where you think the role of the MC and how it's changed now that people are remote and virtual?
Sure. So I think the role of MCs for event organizers has changed. Kind of like with you, Will. Event organizers are trying to figure out how they have to shift with what is happening in the world right now. And I think there's a volume of information, whether it be platforms to use, audience engagement tactics, how to be engaging online, how to create content and curate content that will translate online. There's that whole body of work to event organizers that I think MCs that understand the world of social media, that understand the world of digital, that understand the world of virtual can help. So that's the first role. Is it's no more that I can just waltz into a well-designed conference hall and do my thing, because now those same event organizers are coming to me and be like, okay, we need to change the format. Help us out. So that's the first. And second, with the actual conference itself, it's different, right? So even what we did right before we went live was so important for this podcast to work. And that is just figuring out audio, video, lighting, and all of that. And so there's that whole element where MCs, kind of like what Will was doing for me before, just because you can rock a stage does not mean you can rock a camera with no audience, with no feedback from the audience. It's a totally different game. And so I feel like an MC just smoothens. We're talking about flattening the curve, right? So this is what we do. We flatten the curve so that the experience is a little bit more palatable for everybody, rather than like someone awesome on camera and someone who's just reading notes off into a camera. And a good MC can help with that.
That's awesome. That is so awesome. Yeah, I think definitely, like you said, that, I mean, a lot of the things that you talked about in that last episode about like being the glue that brings everything together is so important. Really quick before we dive into our next question, as the MC, I guess, of today's podcast, I want to make sure I give some shout outs to everybody who's watching so far. Lynn Wellish, thank you so much for joining us. Gerardo, as well as tuning in from Chihuahua, Mexico. Chihuahua, Mexico. Also Shayna Thomas saying very creative topic. Thank you guys so much for joining us. If you do have questions of Dan, ask them in the comments down below. They go straight to us and we're going to answer them to the entire show. So get them coming on in. Let us know in those comments down below what you want to know from Dan, and we'll get rocking and rolling. So let's kind of talk through what happened beforehand. And I think that's an important thing for people to understand what we did and how that was important. And I kind of guess I acted as the MC to help you guide you through as a speaker and be that kind of guiding force. Talk a little bit about that pre-show function and what we did and how you think it's important for an MC to do that as well.
Okay. So essentially, there are two main things I do for every speaker before they come on the stage. And they do translate to the same thing here in a virtual conference. First, I make sure that they're okay and comfortable, because anyone who's happy with themselves before they come on stage is going to deliver really well. And a lot of people are anxious. And even though there is no audience, and even though there might not be 5,000 people looking at me, being in front of a camera is scary for many people. And so the first role is we checked in on a human level. How you guys doing? And it's nice that we have a friendship and we know each other. But a good MC has to make sure that a speaker is comfortable in front of a camera. So that's step number one. Step number two is usually before they come on stage, backstage, I will tell them, monitor your timer is, here is your microphone. Are you going to use a handheld mic or a headset mic? Your sound crew is over here, and I'll kind of guide them through what makes for great performance on stage. There are similar elements when it comes to virtual conferences. For example, a little shift of the camera gives a very different view. Now I've got like a little bit of brown, a little bit of white, and I actually was set up downstairs where I had a complete white wall with a complete white desk and a few nice ornaments placed, but because of bad internet, we couldn't use it, but we had to like modify very quickly. But I also went and got a light, because without the light, this would have been the quality, and it's very different. So little things, and now I can't get the light back on again. So
fun times. We should have rehearsed checked that one. The light cue to get back on.
So lights. So same thing. Audio, video, lights, and even things like timers. So Will, you're doing a good job of muting yourself when you're not asking a question, and just make sure that people know the functionality button. I'm sure people have seen that viral video of the team, yes, he took her camera into the toilet with her. She just didn't think about muting or stopping the camera. But these things happen. So I think coaching people through that is essential. And that's what you were doing with me, just testing the audio of it, because we have options. Right now, I've got you coming through my ears, and that prevents that echo. It's the same thing I tell speakers. When you got a microphone that's a handheld, you cannot walk to a live monitor. Many people don't know that. And they think they can just go up to a live monitor and it causes that feedback. And second, make sure that audio, video, and all of that is working well as well.
Awesome. I love that you're kind of fulfilling the role of the technical advisor in some ways too, because you're a speaker and you understand what the speaker is thinking about. Sometimes, your AV company or your technical event production company or your virtual event production company, they understand the tech portion, but they're not thinking and kind of getting empathetic with the speaker in some levels. So I love that you're like, hey, I want to make them feel comfortable. Then I'm going to tell them some tips to really help them have the best performance possible, which I think is so important, because right now we're in this no man's land where so many people are doing things they've never done before. And you've obviously done it before. So you need to know how you can help people kind of guide through that. When it comes to, other things, what sort of tips do you have to make presenters feel comfortable when it comes to them coming on stage and getting ready to present?
So what I shared there was what happens like 5 minutes before they come on camera, which is what we did about 10, 15 minutes before. But there are a few other things to consider. So I love social media. I'm always, this is actually my phone. We don't have to pretend about it, but it's a massive difference. And so even little things like that is what I love coaching people. Like, how do you use a camera well to reveal the best angles? Second part of it is storytelling looks so different on camera than it does on stage. If I'm on stage, I'm pacing. I create energy. Well, I do more hand movements, and I realize that my frame is upper body. So I can't do anything with my legs. I can't do anything with my hips. I have to use this space. And I also realize that, this little rectangle is our room. This is our connection. So how do you maximize this rectangular space? So game of storytelling, it doesn't necessarily translate on camera. And you have to figure out how to be creative, how to be engaging, how to be animated, how to be energetic in a different world of virtual. So these are some of the tips that are necessary to discuss, even with the most seasoned stage performers, because the online world, unless you daily vlog and unless you are a natural with social media, may not come as naturally when talking to a camera.
That's such a good point. And I definitely think I'm going to come back to what sort of places you can go to in order to gain these skills a little bit more. Because I think even event organizers now are like realizing they're going to be on camera to introduce the speakers in some ways in a light way, right? Maybe they can't afford an awesome MC quite yet, but maybe they just need to do a little bit of light MC. I think we'll come back to that for sure. Talk me through your process of bringing them on stage. And then I think then the next question will be coming on stage after they've spoken and what your kind of process is like for that. So let's start with, You're getting ready to walk on stage. It's usually you're first going on stage solo, right? And then walk us through like what you like to do to bring somebody on stage.
Sure. So when I'm on stage, data that I like to share about the person, but I love that person-to-person, human-to-human connection is what people often remember more than the chronological person that I'm about to introduce. So usually I check the atmosphere of the audience. I can see it on their faces. I can see in their movements. If they're high energy, AKA almost disruptive energy, I'll do something to make them more focused. If they are drained and exhausted, as can often happen post-lunch, I will increase the energy. So first is a health check with the audience. Then I go into, ladies and gentlemen, I've got some really cool backstage that I want to bring on stage. And then I'll share one or two obvious things about the person, and then I'll always share a story that surprises or interests the audience, often on a human level, and then I'll bring them on stage. That is what I do when I am live with somebody, but virtual conferences are very different because people's behavior is very different, as in the audience's behavior is very different on virtual than on stage. Do you want to talk about that right now, or should we just keep to the
Yeah,
stage stuff?
yeah. Let's do it. Let's do it. Let's talk about engaging the audience and what you're doing virtually.
Okay, so right now, I cannot see anybody who is watching this or listening to this. And so I have to imagine the present people that are in the audience, as well as those who will tune in later. And I have to craft my story accordingly. That's why I gave the context of coronavirus instead of just jumping into an assume and talking about virtual conferences. Also, I think it's important to realize that in some platforms, and Will, I'd love if you would share some of these platforms that people can use to host virtual conferences. But on some platforms, you can see the audience, or at least some of them. So how do you check in with people? But I think for an MC, things are different, because when people come to a conference, they will usually stay for the day. When people come to a virtual conference, they don't always stay for the entire conference. And so how you engage people, how you monitor energy is very, very different. Often when I'm doing virtual conferences, I will have breaks, 1 hour breaks, 2 hour breaks, sometimes a keynote today, and then we'll do a deep dive conversation about that topic the next day. And so I think we don't have to put it into this 4 hour, 8 hour longer. But also, then my job as an MC changes, because it's not as smooth as moving swiftly on from this screen to this screen. I'd like to introduce, now we have to do essentially a primer and a closer. And what that simply means is at the start of a virtual conference, hey guys, thank you all for tuning in. Throughout the day, some of the things that you can expect are bam, 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 and expect that people are going to click on or click off. And neither I nor the speaker can be offended by that. But that is how virtual behavior is, as opposed to physically, where people might mentally switch off, but they're physically still in the room. They may be on Twitter, but they're still there. That may not happen for a virtual conference. MC, I often do more of a closing statement, a recap of a talk, because I'm expecting that we're actually not listening to the talk. And so in order to be that glue that I discussed last time, in order to carry that theme of a conference, I feel like an MC has to do more work, because when you physically come to a space, there's some amount of theme, why are you in the room, who is speaking, whereas when it's virtual, some people are just in pajamas, still in bed, cuddling their dog and casually listening on the side. And so as an MC, I feel like that glue element is so much more important with these opening statements, these closing statements, welcoming people constantly. Will, I'm sure you're going to do this during the podcast as well, where, we'd like to celebrate so-and-so that just came in, or I saw this in the comment section, because crowds come and go on virtual in a way that it doesn't in a physical conference. Those are just some stuff in the top of my head. But Will, what are some of the stuff that you are experiencing at virtual conferences?
Yeah, that's I'm always happy to share. Obviously, I love talking about this sort of thing. I think one of the most important things, I mean, first, well, before I even dive into that, since you called me out, I got to do it real quick. Yeah, give some shout outs to Michael Neal, to Hemanj Ridani, I think is who's watching as well. Shauna as well. Also, our good friend Fabian is also out in the audience as well. Johanna as well. Everybody who's watching right now, shout outs to you guys for emoji reacting and all that craziness. Well, to go into what you said, as far as tips that I've seen, I think one of the best things I can see from an audience engagement standpoint is understanding the technology and the platform that you're using too before you go into it. And being able to prime yourself, like you almost said, to be able to know that. For example, I've been doing a lot of Zoom webinars because Zoom is now like the default webinar platform, I think. Good for them. But one of my favorite features is there's a raise hand functionality that attendees can raise their hands. So what I've been doing is I do a virtual wave, and you're going to love this because I know you do physical waves all the time for your events. So what I do is I say, all right, there's a raise hand functionality. Do you guys see that button over there? Take a look at it. Okay, cool. When I say count to three, I want everyone to raise their hands up. And so I do is go 1, 2, 3. Everybody raise their hands up. Everybody puts their hands up, and you see the number shoot up. And you can tell because you can see the total number of attendees and the total number of people who have raised their hands, how much of the gap in engagement that you have. Like if there's 200 people on the webinar and only 190 raise their hands, you're like, okay, I got 90% engagement. But then what I do is I go, okay, now everybody put your hands down. and then everyone puts their hands down, lowers their hands, and I say, put your hands up, and then everyone raises their hands, and you see this like number just go up, and then you have everyone put their hand down, and it's just a chance for people to see like, hey, I'm engaging with you, and it kind of gets them primed to be like, look, I got to be standing by. It's like you're playing a game, almost like slap, okay, and now go, and things like that. So I think understanding your platform and that features helps a ton. So I'm not sure if you have something you want to add into that. Yeah.
So I love that you brought up the idea of gamification, because I think it's so crucial for virtual conferences. Otherwise, people will click out. We're still in the early days of virtual conferences. There's going to be tons of conferences, which means that you have to engage your audience in a really, really important way. What a gamification will, because I think how you do it virtually is different from how you do it in person. In person, I'll raise your hand, we'll do a dance together, we'll do a sing-along, I will do polls, but virtually, you can do things differently. So I love the digital wave of virtual Mexican, but I know a lot of platforms have Q&A options, they have poll options, they have comment sections. It's really important that you use those, but it's also important that you educate your audience on how to use it. I would highly recommend some videos pre-event, well in advance, allowing people to go on these platforms and try these things out. So give them some incentive to start testing the platform. The last thing you want is to lose 30 or 40% of your audience due to technical issues. And they'll try for 2-3 minutes, and then they'll just lose interest and go back to their kid that is howling or their dog that needs a walk. So it's important that pre-event, you do a few technical documents, you give a couple of videos on how to log on, how to create a username, how to create a profile if that's necessary, how to use the different gamification options, the different audience engagement options, and do some trial runs so that when you have your conference, it is super exciting. But please, please use the amazing options that are available online. And that is also true for your speakers. Make sure that they know how to do a vote. Make sure they know how to engage their audience. So for example, if I could see, we've got like live comments, private chat and things like that. If there's something that I need to communicate with Will, I know exactly where to type it in while I get a big live audience with tons of comments coming in. I could even say things like, if you'd like me to talk about this, type in 1 in the comment section. If you'd like me to talk about that, type in 2. And so now I'm engaging people to actually participate and essentially control my talk as I'm giving it. And so you'll see a bunch of 1s and 2s, but that will excite the audience when it comes to online conferences. I guess that's the bottom line. And depending on the platform that you use, make sure you maximize the polls, the Q&As, the screen sharing, and the different competitions that you can run in the comment section. Even things like, hey, we'll give you this merch, or we'll invite you to be a speaker if you've got the best question in the next 20 minutes. And next time we'd like to, so there's all kinds of stuff that you can do online.
I love that. I love that idea too. Like, hey, like maybe there's a way to say, like, if you're doing a good question, we might just bring you on up on stage, almost like you would in person. I think that's incredibly such a cool idea. I think too, don't be afraid for the polling and the Q&A functionality to engage people, to encourage people to engage with it, even if you're not talking about it. So for example, I was giving a webinar yesterday and I had like 20 poll questions I pre-wrote and I had already made. And honestly, my talk, I like ran past a couple of them that I forgot to ask. But instead of being like, I'm not going to ask that, I was just like, let's just throw up the poll. It's not related to what I'm talking about, but it popped up on my screen. They all still voted. They were still listening to what I had to talk about, but you're still able to get that engagement and that collection of data and everything like that as well. And I think that's really, really important. So we got a question coming in from Anna Zamir in the audience on LinkedIn. She's asking, what's the biggest difference between in-person and virtual events, which I know we kind of covered a little bit at the beginning, but she asked a good question. How do you overcome these differences to make it experiential? So how can we make these virtual events more experiential? What's your kind of thoughts around that, Dan?
Is for asking. I don't know if you'd agree with me. That's okay. We're all learning in this together. But that's the opportunity for personal. So when I show up on stage, there is a professional Dan Ram. I've got an amazing video. I've got cool lights. I've got great sound. I've got a nice outfit on. I've got my hair done. I got even my makeup done. And professional Dan Ram comes on stage and I rock it and it's fun. But when we do virtual, I think the real beauty of the intimacy, it's how personal. Like there are no gimmicks. There is no audio, visual, anything. You are meeting the real person, the person that's at home. And I think some of the experience, and I've been playing around with this when I'm emceeing with some of the events I'm going to be doing in the next few weeks, is how do we bring childhood into the virtual conferences in a way that almost wouldn't be appropriate on a big, so relevant when you're broadcasting. For example, one of the things I've asked the speakers at one conference I'm going to do in Belarus, well, virtually, but it's happening in Belarus, is for them to, like, I've got a right over there. You can see 3 photos from my childhood. And I've asked them that in the background, they should have a photo from their childhood. And I'm going to ask them to share it and share the story behind that. And I think that makes sense for me to come on stage and say, here's a childhood when you have it in your home, or even to introduce a family and to say, hey, this is my wonderful wife. Here are my kids. Here's our pet dog. The door. Let's get into the conversation. That doesn't make sense on a big stage, but what a beautifully enhanced experience is that for people to get a snippet into the real, raw, authentic life of speakers, of change makers, of thought leaders. So to me, this is where the beauty of virtual is going to be, is the fact that we're broadcasting from homes. For most of us, I know some people have nice studios and such, but for most of us, we're going to be broadcasting from our homes. And so how do we bring elements and those kind of things into this new world of virtual conferences? So again, you can do as well, but to me, this is where experiences is around personal as opposed to professional.
No, I love it. I think that's so forward thinking. I mean, it's really hard for us to remember that we are at home, we are bringing our lives in. Sometimes the kid's going to rush in, like you said, and just bust in the door, right? And we're totally okay with that. I was saying on a conference call that one of my colleagues was like, their child just comes and sits on their lap, and and you're totally okay with it now. And I think leveraging that now is so smart. And I mean, you bring up kind of a good point too that you kind of mentioned earlier, and I want to kind of ask you a little bit more about this, is that when you're getting it on a personal level with the speakers before you bring them on, are you doing a lot of research ahead of time? Like I know, for example, Tim Ferriss, when he's emceeing and asking questions, he like researched the crap out of people. So he asks really deep questions. What is sort of your process to get to that? How do you, in areas where you don't, how do you almost shortcut it to be able to build that intimacy really quickly?
Apologetic about the fact that I stalk people, and I will tell the speakers I have stalked you. But I consider it a source of great pride that I have the time and I give the time to really understand people's website, their Wikipedia page, their social media profiles. Then I start digging deeper. I look at the kind of stuff that they comment on, the things that they like. I look at things that they have written, reflection pieces. And then I go even deeper. I see what other people have been writing about them, whether it's friends, whether it's newspapers. I tend to stay away from like journalists and what they write because they've obviously got a spin on it. But I try to see, what are their friends saying about them? So we live in this world where everything's online and you can find this stuff online. I'll see what, not just their recent testimonials, I'll go far back on their LinkedIn and see like that first job. What did their peers say? What did their boss say? And often that is a great conversation point when I meet them, because I will start with something like, hey, so Susan wrote this about you about 25 years ago. Do you know Susan and I went to the same college? So I'll try to find that connecting point. Or, I saw that Susan worked at Walmart. Well, my first job was actually at Walmart. Now, it isn't. I just made that up. But if it was, and the intention there is to really understand who they are, not just what they do. And second, to find some mutual interests. Whether it's a sport, whether it's music, whether it's a book that we're reading, whether it's a friend that we have in common, I will try to find some common interest. And that is my leading statement when I meet them backstage, is I'll usually say something like, I have to admit, I've been stalking you, but I realize that 10 years ago, you lived in Zimbabwe. Well, some of my fondest memories were in Zimbabwe. And then that's how we started talking. Because then they'll be like, Zimbabwe, that's so random. Well, I would say the same applies in virtual conferences. You will have to do that research if you're an MC or if you happen to be introducing the next speaker. Then do that research. Really, really understand who they are, not just what they do or what they project, but really the personality of the person. And I will absolutely connect with them before, whether it's an email, whether it's a LinkedIn message, or as Will and I did before we came online, having a. So in a real conference, you have a backstage area where I could meet with people. Here, I can't necessarily unless there's a long enough panel or a key world where I can kind of disappear. More difficult because for me as an MC, when I'm doing virtual conferences, I'm also responsible for audience engagement live. So that's a very important point. A physical conference, then my audience engagement is between segments. When I am doing emceeing work in a virtual conference, my moderation and my audience engagement is continuous. It is the entire day and the entire conference. And so I don't have that time to check in with speakers before they come on. So I will do it days in advance, but it's packaged in with training them to communicate effectively and to tell good stories on a camera. And most speakers are more than happy to get that quick, 30-minute chat as to like, how can they maximize a virtual conference? But those are things I do, because then when I introduce them, I'll be like, so on Wednesday, when I was chatting with Will, he switched to red glasses. So I'm just curious, Will, just to check your microphone, tell me, how many pairs of glasses do you wear? And that's awesome. We'll take it away. And then you will have your talk. And then during that time, I'm, in the comment section and listening to them so that I can effectively recap afterwards. So there you go. That's how I build that connection.
That's awesome. I love that you're also doing the audience engagement. I have a feeling that you're about to get some help in that area where people realize they're going to need an audience engagement like manager, and so that way you can do that full check-in ahead of time. We're going to keep our fingers crossed on that, right? Talking a little bit about the audience engagement when you're not on camera. So for example, in the chat rooms and things like that. Can you tell me a little bit about the stuff? Like I loved your put a 1 in the chat if you like blue. If you like red, put a 2 in the chat, sort of thing. But when you're in the chat and someone else is presenting and you want to get that chat room flowing and get people engaging in it. I grew up in chat rooms, so I feel like I naturally know how to like chat with people and engage with them online. But for some people who aren't familiar with it, what sort of strategies do you have for engaging a chat room as an MC?
All right. I'll give 3, and then Will, I'm going to put you on the spot. You got to give 3, but I'm going to give you a chance to think about it. You did not give me a chance to think about it, but I'm going to give you a chance. So once I'm done with my 3, of which I've thought of 2 so far, but I'll come up with the third very quickly. I'm going to ask you for 3. All right. So tip number 1, and the only way to do that is to ask them something obvious. So something like, quickly type in the comment section where you are tuned in from. So all they got to do is type in the city. And now you've got that flood of comments, and that creates a real sense of energy in the comment section. Or you'll ask them something like, watching this, type 1. If you are dressed, showered, and in an office listening to this, type 2. So again, you've got that flood. So 1 is how to create hype in a comment section, is to ask them something obvious, but not something rhetorical. So don't ask them. I wouldn't even do this on stage. I wouldn't be like, give me a yay if you're happy. That's lame audience engagement. So ask them something that they would want to share. So something like diversity of an audience. So where you're listening from, that is cool. Or something like what you're wearing, because people can't see each other. So it's kind of nice to get a sense of, are they dressed or are they not dressed? Is it morning? Is it evening? Those kind of things. So 1, create hype. 2nd, create discussion. And the best way to create discussion, so this is, I would say, maybe 10 minutes into a talk, is try to have some tough question, something that will cause difference of opinion, right? And so you will post something as a moderator in the comment section saying, so-and-so just said that startups can no more fundraise. They will not be able to fundraise for the next 9 months. There's a yes or a no, and they're going to be split. So the second tip I'd say is create discussion, and I would put that about 7 to 10 minutes into a talk, so people have a chance to hear the opinions of the speaker and then form their own opinions, and then create an opportunity for them to share that. But please pick a question where you're going to have opposing answers and ask them to engage. And finally, number 3, reward people for engagement. So when someone shares something, respond to that. When someone has an opinion and people are attacking, validate the person that has an opinion and say, thank you for sharing, even though it may be unpopular, but please share some more. Why do you feel this way? So reward those who are engaging online. And one of the beautiful things about online is who are the people that will engage, because they may not be a naturally more charismatic, extroverted person that would like the attention of a microphone and a smart question. But online, I think even more people are empowered to share their opinions and their voices. And so reward people by celebrating them, by giving them things, by enticing them of, when we're back at our next conference, we've got tickets to give away. And the most comments or the most responses, or the best question for the section gets to come and be part of our physical conference later this year or something of that sort. So those are my 3 tips. I've already forgotten what those 3 are, but I think they were good. So,
oh my gosh, that was so good, Dan. I mean, like, I mean, the fact that you didn't have a third one too, that's my favorite thing ever is when I'm presenting and someone's asked a question. I'm like, I'm going to do 3 things because great things come in 3 pairs, and then you just figure out the last one. Because it's like, it's in your head. It's just like buried and you just kind of got to pick it out. I love that. In fact, I just asked a controversial question in the chat. So if you are watching over on any of our platforms live, you'll be able to engage in that conversation. So make sure that you go over in the comments and ask the question and join the conversation. So I love that. That was one of my favorite ones to get the discussion flowing, because that's something I think I don't do well enough, is getting the conversation, getting people talk. It's almost scary sometimes because you're presenting and then you start seeing everyone talking about these other things. You kind of want to engage with that, but then you have to be like, no, they're doing their thing. I have content I need to present or what share. Let me go ahead and do that too. I also love the hype. I think it's so important is to get that every once in a while, say like something like blow up the chat, because then people just see all the energy and they're like, wow, oh my God, it's like the cheering and the everything like that. Oh, so good. Okay, so I have to come up with 3 now. This is going to be very, very difficult because I'm so fixated on the cool ones that you have. So let's see here. Ways to get the chat flowing. Something that's been really helpful for me is that as I'm presenting, if I know of resources, for example, I mentioned a book or a blog or I don't know what it is, something. If I mention some sort of resource, a link to a blog post, I want to grab that link and make sure it's posted in the chat, because I think it shows people like, hey, there's valuable information being shared in the chat that I just have to click on, that I have to go to, and everything like that. And whether it's me posting a link, which sometimes it is if I'm solo presenting, or having someone from my team say, here's the link to that blog post Will just mentioned or whatever it may be, I think it gets people to go, oh my gosh, there's value in this chat. I need to be paying attention in this chat because I'm going to miss out on all the links or whatever it may be. So that's my first one, is share additional resources and expand upon to give people more. Next thing on the chat side of things as well is I think addressing people by name and saying things like, oh, that, like, for example, Gerardo, for example, he asked a really, really great question, and it is not relevant to what we're talking about right now. I love you, Gerardo. So what I did is I messaged him, I replied to him. I tagged him and said, specifically him, I said, that's such a great question. That actually might be better for our next talk that we're going to do on cancellation of events. Make sure to tune that on in. And so like tagging him and directly responding and answering his individual question, I think helps a ton as well. Yeah, go ahead, Dan.
No, I was just taking a photo. So I can online. So we're going on. We're using social media as well. But I love your point about action the conversation, because when you're on a physical stage, there is a gap between, hey guys, I have a resource, come chat with me after a talk. And then they proceed to talk about a whole bunch of the stuff and just drop me an email. But that is a future tense action. Whereas when you're doing virtual, it can be right there. So something like, I'm going to put my email, hey guys, follow me, and I'm following everyone back. So like this Sunday, I'm giving a talk with Nico Rosberg, right? So big F1 champion, Kevin Spacey, who is controversial on so many levels, but he's coming to give a talk as well. And I know if people felt that they could have a chance to connect or they would. And so the way to do that is to action it virtual, but you can't necessarily in a physical conference. So that is a great point, Will. I love that.
Awesome.
And now back to you.
Let's see. And I got to come up with a third. I'm definitely not prepared with my third one.
I felt you
ooh,
kind
yeah,
of
yeah, I said-
waffling, which is why I stepped in and
You
spoke a
you
little
saved
bit.
me.
And I was expecting you to have a third by the time I finished my Kevin Spacey
You know, I definitely
story,
should
but I
have a
guess you're
third.
still not ready.
You know, I was listening. I was so in tune and in the moment with you. I would say one of the last things I would recommend as well is that give the opportunity to share their contact information in terms of like a networking aspect as well. There's a lot of tools and platforms we're working with clients right now to create that one-on-one networking experience, but a chat can create that kind of at scale networking experience. So for example, give the opportunity for someone to say, hey, blah, 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 he just talked about this law, blah, blah. I'm an attorney. I
Yes.
can help people with that sort of thing and post it there. I've seen a couple times where people mention, I have a resource, I can help with this, blah, blah, blah. And then I saw people's emails just get flooded in the chat. People like, here's my email address, here's my email address. And people are just willing to give out their contact information in front of a public chat to be able to not interact with me, but interact with someone else inside the chat, which I think is huge as well. So there's a good one. I love the giveaway aspect too. Like giving away something, like you have to be present. And I think that's one of the important things is that we want to try to get people away from putting stuff on in the background. We want them to, have it on their screen, full screen with the chat and the Q&A panel and everything together, not just having it, I'll put it in the background and listen to it as I answer emails or whatever it may be. The equivalent of putting your, like trying to keep attendees off their phones, right? So that's one of our biggest things. Okay, so we only got a couple more minutes left. I want to kind of continue asking some questions as well. What do you think is the best way an MC, let's say if they're doing a multi-day virtual event, how can an MC cap off the end of the day and make it so the attendees are so excited for the next day that you can get that return, keep the retention day to day when it comes to a virtual event? What's kind of your strategies you would have for creating a virtual retention from day to day? How do you get people to come back for day two?
All right, that is a great question, and also thank you for covering while my internet was playing games with us.
I got you.
And this is important. If you're going to have a virtual conference, you need to have someone who can ad lib and can cover. Because if you thought physical conferences have tech failures, virtual conferences do like times 10, times 15, times 20. And having someone who's experienced is so key. So well done, Will. Thank you for stepping in there. But I would say recap and selling. I guess my best tips are think like a radio presenter. Radio presenters have this thing that they have to do where between songs, they kind of have to say, thank you so much for that great interview with so-and-so. We're going to go to this song, but when we come back, you're going to have this. And then people listen to this lovely track, but they're also going to stay tuned. They're not going to like tune out. And so you are forward selling. That's essentially the term in radio world. And it's the same when you're doing virtual conferences. So imagine that after this, after 20 minutes after we ended, we were going to do another talk on platforms that event organizers should be checking out to go virtual. So what Will would do at the end of this is go, that was a fantastic conversation with Dan. Dan, thanks so much. By the way, if you want to get on the discussion forum for the next 15 minutes, answering your questions one-on-one. So please engage with him, but also don't be afraid to talk to each other. Here's how you can like the options that they have for talking to each other as well. And go take a quick coffee break, come back, get comfortable, because in 15 minutes, we're really, really excited to platform someone about Zoom, about the best platforms available. So again, in the discussion section, chat with each other, chat with Dan, who's going to be live answering your questions one-on-one, and then come back in 15 minutes sharp for another great conversation. So you're forward selling. And that's essentially what I'd be doing throughout the conference. And then at the end of it, I would usually say a thank you, not expecting that it's the same audience that I started with in the morning, but whoever's there at that moment, I'll just say thank you to all of you. Please come back in tomorrow morning, and don't be afraid tomorrow morning and I list out like the top 3 highlights that I'm expected. But please realize with forward selling that you cannot expect people to be tuned in an hour or 3 hours later. So you're literally just forward selling the next thing. the thing that's happening 10 minutes from now, the thing that's happening 5 minutes from now, the thing that's happening in a different section of your platform. So, the main screen is off, but section is going to be live for the next 10 minutes, things like that. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. I think it ties into the sales psychology purely as well, that they always say that you should always have one next step, right? So at the end of your sales pitch and you show them this massive proposal, you should be saying, here's what the next steps are. Can we agree to this one single step? Not saying here's this whole outline of all these steps. I think it's so smart to realize that people's attention spans don't have the ability to think from 8 p.m. today to 8 a.m. tomorrow, but they do have the ability to think about the next 15 minutes, what I'm doing as well. So the more you can just sell that one step, and then when you have them in that next step, sell them on to the next step. And you'll see some, obviously some trail off on there, but then you're keeping the core most engaged people throughout the entire process, which I think that's so smart along the entire way. Dan, wow, so much good stuff in here. We only got 10. Oh, yeah. Dan, lay it down.
If you were going to end, I did have, the last 5 minutes, but essentially I want to share 4 or 5 ways are not going to be replaced by virtual conferences, but they actually are just different ways completely. So this isn't I'm going to compromise for virtual conference, or this is a substitute. Short actually are beautifully different and really exciting in their own right. There are things that I cannot do virtually that I can do. So that's how I want to wrap things up. But if you've got other questions and things that you want to talk about right now,
no. Yeah, typical ending event icons questions is we'll do the resources and then your one tip. So maybe if you want to roll this into your one tip, and if you have a random one tip at the end too to lay it down. But yeah, maybe lay us down the 5 things. And then any sort of tips that you have for planners who are out there planning virtual events. So go ahead and drop the hammer, and then we'll end with resources.
All right, time to drop the hammer. 5 things to consider when you're building a virtual conference, because I'm going to state the obvious, virtual conferences are not physical conferences, but some beautiful new opportunities. 1, new audience ends, countries and cultures and continents and time, potentially engaging far more people. Number 2, new revenue streams, because when you do a physical conference, there ways you can monetize. When you do virtual conferences, there are a whole new gamut of ways that you can monetize. So get into how you can get new partners, new sponsors, and even your audience to pay you in new ways. 3, new audience engagement. Sure, I don't have a band to groove to on stage. I don't have cool lights and a beautiful platform, but virtual, through the discussion forum, through the chat section, through the poll, offers a whole new different audience engagement opportunity. 4, a whole new experience when it comes to speakers. But I think intimacy and personal experiences is what virtual conferences are going to allow, because now we're going to meet people in their homes in a new special kind of way that on a big stage just does not translate in the same way. We're going to meet family members. We're going to meet dogs. We're going to meet them wearing normal. You've seen with a lot of celebrities online, you're going to meet speakers without makeup as they are in their most authentic. There's a longevity to virtual that does not exist when it comes to physical. Because when it comes to physical, people show up for the day. But I know this, and Will knows this, my audience, who I fondly call in, it doesn't matter event I'm in, every single day they are with me. And for event organizers, this is the biggest opportunity. This is how you get that email list. This is how you get the social media connections with your audience so that you can connect with them every single day, which means you got to think about content and dissemination of information in a very different way. We're not talking an 8-hour talk, conference. We're not talking about a 20-minute keynote. We're talking about daily content. How are you going to do that? So these are 5 things that I think virtual conferences enhance and help. So for any event organizer that is stressing out about the conversion, realize you're walking into a new paradigm. Connect with people like Will at Endless Events, connect with people like myself, connect with social media influencers, connect with people who understand the world of virtual, because this is a new space, but an exciting space.
I love it. Oh my gosh. We made it all the way through all 5. It worked perfectly. Dan, wow, so many good tips. And I think that was so much good information. Let's end the show with favorite resources. What places do you go to learn things? How are you staying on top of everything right now? What sort of favorite tools, tips, blogs, softwares that you're loving right now when it comes to the virtual emceeing, the virtual events, all that sort of stuff?
We've got live streaming options like Facebook, YouTube, that will live stream to large groups of people. You've got what trainers and webinars have preferred, like Zoom, Google Hangouts, and others that you can check out. There are some newer platforms out there. I am seeing a whole bunch of, as would be expected, the entry of a lot of new startups that have some really cool functionality. Please test them out. I expect there to be a huge growth in the different platforms available for virtual conferences. So one, keep Googling, keep searching, keep exploring. As much as people have been creative and have been trying to increase the experience at physical conferences, the same is now going to happen with virtual conferences. And I expect that even the information I shared now will be outdated in 2 weeks. That's how quick I expect the growth and new ways to host virtual conferences. But what I would say as a tip right now is don't go with traditional. Go with people who are digital natives. Watch more carefully what YouTube stars are doing. How are they engaging people online every single day? How are they engaging audiences online every single day? How are they telling stories online every single day? How are they using a rectangular space and one camera to capture ideas and thoughts every single day? So watch influencers, watch YouTubers, watch TikTok. You know, you don't have to give someone a 20-minute keynote like you would do on stage. Why not give them 15 seconds? I mean, after all, there are people with millions of followers who create 15-second videos, 30-second videos, and don't for a second think that they're not effective in communicating their ideas or their thoughts. So watch digital natives right now. This is not the time to be watching TV show hosts and people who work in studios or radio presenters or television stars. They're great, but that is not the platform in the world we live in today. So get with people who are digital natives. And when you're hiring an MC, when you're hiring a speaker, check their social media profile. Do to the digital world, because if they do, they will translate to the virtual world. But your speakers that nailed it on a stage, on a camera. Your MCs that were fantastic on stage may not be fantastic digital natives.
Wow. Wow. I mean, seriously, so many knowledge bombs and so much good stuff. I love the idea of looking at their digital footprint and, how are they utilizing their digital tools already first. I absolutely love that. I think that's so important right now because we don't know. You don't. For a lot of people, we don't know who's going to be good on camera, but that's a great way, I think, to vet people. Dan, I think we've come to the end of the episode. How can people reach you if they're looking for someone like you to engage with their virtual audience and get them fired up and ready to go? What's the best way for people to reach out to you?
Please get in touch. My name is Dan Ram. I am Dan Ram on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube. If you drop me an email to team@IamDanRam, if you just Google Dan Ram, you'll see tons of content online. I check everything constantly, and I'm really keen to help people. I genuinely feel with all the negativity and all the hurt and all the pain in the world, I want to empower those that can see not opportunity, but a desire to make an impact. The world needs good conversations. They need positivity. They need hangouts. They need people connecting online. You guys can do that. And if I can help you with that, let's talk, because I'm fully, wholeheartedly committed to making this a great season for growth in human development, not decay of human development.
I love it. Dan, thank you so much for coming on the show again. Short notice. We knew we got to get you on. I really, really appreciate it. Everybody out there, feel free to give a big, huge digital round of applause in the comments for Dan for coming on and taking time. And I think that's a little bit earlier than we usually do. It's like midnight there or so, or
11:30 p.m.
Yeah, 11:30 p.m.
Yeah.
Thank you for staying up so late, sacrificing some sleep to help share this stuff. It was fantastic. I learned so much. I'm sure you, the audience, learned so much. Reach out to Dan if it's something that you need help with, for sure. And for everybody watching Event Icons, we got so many more episodes coming. You literally be recording twice a day, all throughout this entire time to be able to get some information out to you guys. So stay tuned to the live streams. Make sure you're subscribing to on your favorite podcast platforms and everything like that as well. Everybody on LinkedIn Live, YouTube, Facebook Live, you guys are awesome. Everybody in our exclusive Event Icons Facebook group, you guys are awesome. Thank you for tuning in. Dan, thank you so much for coming back on air, and hopefully we'll see you again very, very soon. And thank you again to our audience. We're going to get out of here. We got more content to put out. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. Dan, thank you so much, and we'll see you guys all next time on Event Icons.
Thank you for joining us for another amazing episode of Event Icons.
To catch all the bonus content, resources mentioned, and an invite to our Facebook and LinkedIn groups,
Head to www.event-icons.com. Also, let us know what you thought about this week's episode. Share your biggest takeaway. Just tag your post with Event Icons. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you again for joining us. We'll see you next Wednesday at 5 p.m. Eastern, right here on Event Icons.